Hello, welcome to the channel. Subscribe, leave a like, and don't forget to write a comment. Enjoy watching.
When the doors opened that morning, there wasn't a single member of my family in sight, and that was exactly how I wanted it. The champagne had already been chilled for hours, the new glass windows gleamed like the future itself, and the custom signage, Myers & Co. Marketing downtown cast a sharp shadow across the sidewalk, a line between what I used to be and who I'd finally become. The room buzzed with compliments and flash photography. The local business journal sent a junior reporter to take notes, and one of my old college professors, the only one who ever believed in me, was laughing beside the dessert table, already 2 bites into a lemon tart. People hugged me, clapped me on the back, asked when I'd be franchising, and all the while, I kept smiling like it was natural. Like I hadn't rehearsed this moment every day since I walked out of that damn house 15 years ago, dragging a suitcase and a degree they said was useless. Funny how you can get everything you ever wanted and still feel the sting of what you never had. Not one call. Not one card. Not one text that morning from anyone who shared my blood. That's the thing with people like my Aunt Linda. They don't say sorry when they're wrong. They just wait until they can pretend nothing happened. But I remembered. I remembered everything. The smirks at the dinner table. The way my cousins used to fake clap when I brought home a B+. And my mother, sitting there quietly, sipping her tea like she'd already accepted that I was the family's wasted potential. They had names for me, the artsy one, the emotional one, the one who dropped out of law school to build a website. They didn't understand what I was doing, so they laughed. And when they laughed, I learned how to get silent. But silence wasn't the same as surrender. It started on a Christmas Eve, the one burned into my memory with such painful detail I could sketch the room blindfolded. 1999. My cousin Vanessa got into Princeton. Everyone applauded like it was the second coming. The table was filled with overcooked ham and too many casseroles, and Aunt Linda, in her cashmere turtleneck and pearls, always dressed like she'd just come from a Republican fundraiser, looked across the table at me and tilted her glass with that half-smile of hers. "You know, Rachel," she said, swaying a little from the Chardonnay, "we're all just a little worried you'll never really make anything of yourself." The room had gone quiet. Even the kids stopped picking marshmallows off the sweet potatoes. "You're just so sensitive. Maybe you'll marry rich." I didn't say anything then. I just nodded like a good girl and let the comment slide down my throat like acid. But that sentence stayed with me, aged in my chest like a poison, ripening into fuel. After college, when I didn't get the kind of job my parents wanted, they stopped inviting me to holidays. My mom said it was too tense when I was around, like I was a ghost who reminded them failure was contagious. At first, I begged to be included. Then I got tired. Then I disappeared. Not just from their dinner tables, but from their gossip, too. I worked nights, bartended weekends, built my first client list out of favors and small-town referrals. By 28, I had enough to go full-time. By 31, I had a team. And by 37, I had my second office. That office, the one we opened that morning, wasn't just a space. It was a symbol. It was everything they said I couldn't do. Polished wood floors, a built-in espresso bar, hand-picked furniture that looked like it came straight out of an Elle Decor shoot. Clients loved the space. It looked successful because it was. And it didn't need a damn ounce of their approval to shine. The day went on in a blur of laughter, business cards, and mini cupcakes with the company logo printed in frosting. My assistant, Kara, nudged me around 2 in the afternoon and said someone had dropped something off for me. Didn't say who it was from. Just left it with the concierge downstairs. I took the envelope, thick and cream-colored, the kind that smells like money and pretension. The handwriting on the front curled with elegance, too much elegance. I already knew. There was only one branch of the family tree that wrote like that. Inside, nestled between layers of tissue and gold foil, was an invitation. "You are cordially invited to the engagement celebration of Vanessa Langley and Derek Price," it read. Location: a vineyard in Aspen. Dress code: formal. RSVP by next Thursday. There was a handwritten note clipped to the corner. We'd love to see you there, Rachel. It's been too long. Too long? I hadn't seen these people in a decade and a half. And now that Vanessa was marrying a guy with a hedge fund, suddenly I mattered again? I read the invite twice, then a third time, slower. And that was when the idea started to form, not completely, just the shape of it. I didn't know what I was going to do yet, but I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to decline. I stared at that wedding invitation for 3 whole days before I made a decision, not because I didn't know how I felt, but because I knew exactly how I felt, and that's what scared me. You spend your whole life thinking you'll eventually stop caring what they think of you, that success will wrap you in some kind of emotional armor, but then you get a fancy envelope in the mail, and you're 14 again. Standing in your aunt's living room in an itchy dress, while everyone compares your GPA to Vanessa's like you're a side dish they regret ordering. I'd told myself for years that it didn't matter anymore, that I'd moved on, built my own life, opened not 1 but 2 successful companies in just over 20 years. Well, technically it was 11, but you get the point. And yet the moment I saw that gold script with my name spelled out like I still belonged to them, something old and sharp twisted in my stomach. I was 37 years old, and I still wanted to show them. Which is pathetic, I know, but also kind of human. Vanessa's wedding was going to be a spectacle, no doubt about that. The Langley family didn't do anything in half measures, especially when it involved public displays of status and wealth. The vineyard in Aspen had already been posted on her Instagram story, wide shots of the ceremony lawn, string quartet rehearsals, gold napkin rings embossed with the couple's initials. It looked like a lifestyle magazine and smelled like desperation to prove something. The same desperation that used to make Aunt Linda park her Range Rover in front of the house sideways so everyone could see the lease sticker. And maybe it was that, the performative nature of it all, that made me realize how perfect the timing could be. I hadn't initially planned a big celebration for the second office opening. The first one had been all nerves and humble gratitude, a quiet affair with bagels and business partners. But this time felt different. I wasn't just expanding, I was arriving. I'd survived the burnout, the slow seasons, the lonely months when payroll was more of a prayer than a guarantee. I'd hustled, built a brand, led a team, and learned the kind of lessons that no MBA program could ever teach. I didn't need their approval, but part of me wanted them to see what I'd become, not because I needed the validation, but because I wanted them to feel the absence of their belief in me. And what better way to do that than to throw a grand opening event the same weekend as Vanessa's wedding? I laughed out loud when the idea hit me. Kara, my assistant, was sitting across the office from me and raised an eyebrow, waiting for me to explain the sudden burst of laughter. I waved it off and said I'd tell her later, but my mind was already racing. Still, before I could set anything in motion, I had to see them again. Just once. Just to remember how it felt to be underestimated in real time. So I RSVP'd yes to the engagement party, picked a dress that screamed confidence without begging for attention, and walked into that oversized country club ballroom like I owned the place. Because in a way, I did. Not the building, of course, but the moment. The narrative. The power. It was mine now. The room smelled like over-perfumed nostalgia and catered seafood. White hydrangeas bloomed from the center of every table, and a string quartet played a version of Sweet Child O' Mine that felt both ironic and wildly inappropriate. I saw Aunt Linda before she saw me, hair like spun glass, smile like a shark with veneers. She blinked when our eyes met, then pasted on the expression she always wore around people she thought might be useful someday. "Oh, Rachel," she sang, pulling me into a hug that felt more like a hostage situation. "So glad you could come. We've all been following your little company online. It's just wonderful you finally have a real job." I smiled without showing teeth. "Thanks, Linda. You look expensive." She didn't catch the bite, or maybe she did and chose to ignore it. That was always her move, pretend the insult was a compliment and keep smiling like it was all part of a photo shoot. Vanessa was in the corner, surrounded by people who probably didn't know her middle name but would post photos with her like they were lifelong friends. She looked the same, just shinier. Same tight smile, same calculating eyes. We locked gazes for a second, and I gave her a nod. Nothing more. Let her wonder why I came. I stayed for one drink. Just long enough to be seen, to plant the idea that I was doing better than they expected, and then I left before dessert. Because I already had what I came for. That night, lying in bed with my laptop open and a glass of Malbec sweating beside it, I typed out a message to Kara, "Let's move the opening event." I wanted the same weekend as Vanessa's wedding. I didn't need to say why. She'd understand. The morning we launched the new campaign, I stood in front of the massive vinyl billboard across from the Aspen Vineyard and had to suppress the kind of laughter that comes straight from a part of your soul that used to be hurt but now just feels dangerous. The sign was bold, deliberate, and impossible to ignore. Stark white with navy blue lettering that screamed authority and elegance at once, reading in capital letters, "Grand Opening, Myers & Co., Downtown Office. Client first, always." Below it, we'd added a photo of the team in front of our new building, hands clasped, smiling with a kind of quiet power that didn't need approval to shine. And right there on the bottom, the date, the same weekend as Vanessa's wedding, just a 5-minute walk from the reception hall. I hadn't done it to ruin anything, not directly. I wasn't trying to sabotage her ceremony or distract her guests. But I knew exactly what I was doing when I chose the location and had the billboard installed the week before the wedding. Aspen was small enough that nothing went unnoticed, and this wasn't the kind of sign you passed without reading. Every family member who drove in for the rehearsal dinner would see it from their rental car window, and every one of them would do the math and wonder why they hadn't heard about it, why they weren't invited. It wasn't about being cruel. It was about finally having the last word. When I started freelancing, I was waiting tables at a diner that smelled like old grease and burnt toast, working the late shift after emailing logo samples to real estate agents who thought $50 was overpaying for a website. I remember one night during Thanksgiving when my family was all together. Everyone except me, my cousin Mark, had posted something on Facebook like, "Rachel's still playing with her little art projects. At least she's good at latte foam now." They all liked it. Even my mother. They thought it was a joke. That I was just floundering until I found a husband or gave up and asked to work at one of their companies. Nobody called to ask how I was doing. Nobody wanted to understand what I was building. And when I stopped showing up to holidays altogether, no one asked why. My mother told people I was focusing on herself like it was some kind of diagnosis instead of a decision. Maybe that's what bothered them most, that I didn't need them. That I walked away without begging to be let back in. Now I had 23 employees spread across 2 offices, clients in 4 states, a 6-figure contract pending approval with a tech startup out of Seattle, and a staff turnover rate that made HR execs blink twice. I wasn't just doing well, I was thriving. But through it all, not one damn call from my mother. Not a single voicemail. Not a text to say, "I saw your company in the business journal." Nothing. Just silence, stretched so thin it was almost brittle. And the part that made me sick sometimes, in that quiet hour just before sleep, was that I still wanted to hear from her. I still wanted her to say she was proud of me. That she'd been wrong. That I wasn't some fragile flower wilting in the real world. But that call never came. And maybe it never would. So I made other people notice. We launched a PR blitz so sharp it practically sliced the town in half. Local press? Check. Online ads geo-targeted to everyone attending the wedding? Check. Swag bags for our guests that included gourmet chocolate, branded candles, and a handwritten thank you note from me? Done and done. Kara, my assistant, joked that it felt like we were planning an offensive rather than an opening, and honestly, she wasn't wrong. But I didn't feel guilty. Because for once, I was playing on my own terms. As the RSVPs rolled in, the names on the list made me smile. Old clients, new clients, competitors who wanted to network, and industry voices I'd only ever seen on LinkedIn. But none of the names on that list were family. That part was intentional. I didn't want apologies by then. I wanted absence to speak louder than forgiveness. The day before the opening, while reviewing final logistics at the venue, an airy, restored industrial space with exposed brick and floor-to-ceiling windows, I got a message on Instagram. The name lit up my screen like a warning flare. Vanessa Langley. Her message was short, brutal, in that surgically restrained way that only women like her could manage. Petty move. Very you. I stared at it for a while. Not because it hurt, but because it confirmed everything I'd always suspected. That underneath the perfect hair, the curated captions, and the diamond that probably cost more than my first year of rent combined, Vanessa was still furious I had the audacity to build a life without needing her approval or her presence. I typed back slowly, making sure every letter landed just right. Exactly. Then I locked my phone, took a breath, and turned back to the space we'd just transformed into something extraordinary. Let her have her wedding. Let them sip champagne and whisper about my billboard like it was a scandal. Because I wasn't crashing their celebration. I was throwing one of my own. The first thing I noticed that morning wasn't the flowers or the smell of roasted coffee or the careful lighting we'd spent weeks perfecting to bounce just right off the exposed brick. No, the first thing I noticed was how different I felt. I didn't feel like the girl who used to cry in the bathroom at family gatherings, pretending it was allergies or hormones or just something dumb she'd eaten. I didn't feel like the version of myself who once stood in the rain outside a networking event because she was too afraid to walk in alone. That version was dead and gone, buried under years of work, sweat, and disappointment so heavy it might as well have been poured in concrete. Today I walked in like I owned the place, because I did down to the last lamp, the last pen, the last employee name tag carefully pinned to each shirt with a tiny brass clasp. The team was buzzing, dressed sharp, hair perfect, voices loud with the kind of confidence that builds when you're standing inside something you helped create. There were clients flying in from different states just to say congratulations in person. There were reporters from the local business section scribbling notes about the expansion and asking for quotes. Even my old boss, the one who once told me I was too opinionated to lead a team, stood near the espresso cart pretending he didn't recognize me until I walked over and extended my hand with a smile that said, "You remember now, don't you?" The place filled quickly, bodies flowing through the space like water, some familiar, some new, all of them curious, all of them there because they respected me or wanted to be seen respecting me. Either way, I didn't mind. I circulated like a hostess at a party she actually wanted to attend, stopping to laugh, to think, to share, keeping one eye on the door but not out of fear or hope, just awareness. Because part of me expected it. Not all of them, of course. But maybe one, maybe two. Someone with the last name Myers or Langley who'd show up uninvited just to say they'd seen it. And around an hour into the event, I saw her. Aunt Linda stepped through the front door like she'd been sent by fate itself, draped in a cream coat that probably cost more than my first car, hair lacquered into place, lips pulled back in that high society smile that never quite reached her eyes. For a moment, she stood still, scanning the room like it belonged to her, like she was there to inspect the space, not celebrate it. People around her didn't know who she was, not yet, but I did. I could have picked her out in a crowd of thousands. She caught my gaze and made a beeline across the floor, heels sharp on concrete, voice already warming up like she was preparing for a toast. "Rachel," she said, dragging out the syllables like honey over a knife, this is quite something, isn't it?" She glanced around as if it might all fall apart the second she blinked. "We were all so worried you'd never make anything of yourself." I didn't flinch. I didn't even breathe for a second, because this was the moment I'd imagined too many times to count, the moment I would finally say the thing I should have said years ago. "That's why none of you were on the guest list." Her smile froze mid-sentence, eyes twitching just slightly like her brain was short-circuiting in real time. I watched it happen, the shift from superiority to confusion to insult, all within the space of 2 seconds. And then, before she could recover, I turned and gestured to the woman standing just behind her. "Linda, have you met our CFO, Amanda?" I said casually, like this was just business as usual. "You two almost worked together once, didn't you?" Amanda smiled, wide and unbothered, offering a firm handshake that Linda accepted with visible reluctance. Years ago, Linda had interviewed Amanda for an assistant role at one of her husband's companies and turned her down with a comment that was whispered around our family for months. She just looked too poor. It would make the clients uncomfortable. Now Amanda ran my financials and negotiated contracts with a calm precision that scared our competitors. Watching her look Linda in the eye and say, "Pleasure to finally meet you," was the most delicious kind of full-circle karma I'd ever tasted. But just as I was preparing to bask in the moment, I heard a voice that knocked the wind out of me. "You've changed." I turned, slowly, and there she was, my mother, wearing the same expression she always wore when she wasn't quite sure whether to hug me or scold me. I hadn't seen her in years, not in person, and yet here she was, looking at me like I'd just broken something precious. "No," I said quietly and with more honesty than I expected. "You just never saw who I was." She looked away for a second, like she might cry, or maybe just retreat back into the bubble she'd always lived inside, where feelings were inconvenient and silence was the preferred language. I expected her to leave after that. Maybe I even hoped she would. But instead, she took a step closer and said something I didn't see coming. "You weren't invited," she said, her voice low and almost trembling, "because your father didn't want to see you." And just like that, the noise of the room disappeared. The last real conversation I had with my father wasn't dramatic or loud or even particularly memorable at the time, but it stayed in my head for over a decade, like a splinter under the skin, small, sharp, and impossible to ignore. I remember we were standing in the garage of the old house, the one they sold a few years later when the neighborhood started slipping out of their comfort zone, and I was trying to explain what I was working on, trying to get him to understand that building websites wasn't just a hobby or a passing distraction. It was raining lightly, the kind of mist that doesn't drench you but still clings to your clothes, and I'd just come from a client meeting I was proud of. I was hoping, stupidly, that maybe this time he'd look at me like he used to when I won spelling bees or brought home drawings from school, like he believed I was going somewhere. Instead, he sighed, walked over to the workbench, and said without turning around, "You're just not practical, Rachel. You dream too much." I didn't say anything in response. I just stood there, letting the words settle between us like dust in a quiet room, and then I left. That was the last time we spoke face-to-face without other people in the room. After that, every exchange was filtered through birthdays, group messages, or forced pleasantries at funerals. He never asked about my work again, and I never offered details. It became easier to let the distance grow than to keep running into that wall of quiet disappointment he wore like a tailored suit. So when my mother told me he didn't want to see me, that he had asked not to be reminded of my name, not to be forced to face the reality that I'd built something he never believed was possible, I didn't feel angry the way I expected to. I just felt tired. Not the kind of tired you fix with sleep, but the kind that settles deep in your bones, the weight of years of effort falling all at once. He wasn't coming to the wedding, that much I already knew. He wasn't coming to my opening, either. He was too sick to travel, too sick to pretend anymore, and maybe too sick to carry the weight of the judgment he never stopped handing out. The next morning, while the confetti from the launch party still lingered in the corners of my office floor, I got in my car and drove. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't plan it. I just woke up, got dressed in jeans and a sweatshirt, grabbed a thick envelope from my desk drawer, and drove the 3.5 hours to the quiet suburban street where my parents now lived. The sky was gray, the kind of gray that feels like a dare, like the world is asking if you're sure you want to do this, and I pulled up outside their house just as a neighbor was walking their dog. I kept the engine running, hands shaking slightly even though I'd spent weeks telling myself I was past this, that I didn't need anything from them anymore. I didn't ring the bell. I didn't want a conversation or another sentence to tuck into my memory like a wound. I just walked up to the door, set the envelope down gently on the welcome mat, and left. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a signed copy of the official incorporation documents for Myers and Company, with my name typed at the bottom in bold, black ink. Below that, in my own handwriting, I'd written a note on plain white stationery. You were wrong, and I forgive you. I didn't expect him to read it. I didn't expect anything, really. But it felt like something I had to do, not for him, but for me, to prove that I wasn't holding on to the bitterness, even if it had built the foundation for everything I had created. That I could let go of the weight, even if the scar would stay. I never saw him again. A few weeks later, my mother left a voicemail saying he'd passed quietly in his sleep. No details, no tears, just a short message delivered like it was a weather report. I didn't return the call. I sent flowers, the expensive kind with lilies and white roses, and a donation to the hospice center in his name. That was enough. People think success feels like champagne or applause or finally buying the car you used to stare at through the dealership window. But for me, it was quieter than that. It was the frozen look on Aunt Linda's face when she realized I'd built something better than she could ever fake. It was the moment I saw my mother try to guilt me and fail. It was knowing that for all their warnings, all their doubt, all their whispered judgments behind closed doors, none of them could say they helped me get here. And still, part of me wishes I could have stood in front of him one last time, not to gloat or demand an apology, but just to show him the truth. That dreams are only foolish to people who are too afraid to try. Some people measure success in money, others in titles. For me, it was always simpler. It was in the moment she realized she didn't matter anymore. In the way they talked about me like I had become someone new, when the truth was, I'd always been this person, they just never bothered to look. So go ahead. Keep worrying about me. Just don't expect an invite when it finally pays off.